Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started at the top of the hour because we have a great presentation ahead of us today. My name is Sasha Beatty, and I am Senior Counsel at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. APA is a private nonprofit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. Thank you for joining us for this prosecutorial case backlog webinar today. This project is supported by the Stand Together Trust, and APA is very appreciative of their financial assistance and commitment to improving the justice system. Points of view or opinions of this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of APA or our funder. Now, just some very quick housekeeping before we begin. If you have a question for our guest today, please use the Q&A widget, which is typically found at the bottom of your screen. We will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but you can go ahead and put those in at any time, and then we'll read them out to our presenter at the end of the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties like audio, video, or other, or just have any questions, just pop into the chat box, which is also typically found at the bottom of your screen, and one of us will assist you with any quality issues you might be encountering. Finally, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of California MCLE. Attendees are required to self-report. Please reach out to apaadmin@apainc.org if you have any questions about this process. Now, it is my very great pleasure to welcome our presenter today, Jennifer Verdeja from the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, who will be sharing her and her office's insights on the work that they've done to address case backlog. It's been an absolute privilege to work with her and her colleagues at the office and our case backlog project. I'm very excited to introduce her today. Jennifer is currently an assistant director of the Trials Division in the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. Jennifer supervises felony level trial attorneys, provides training to law enforcement, and participates in numerous committees, many focused on issues of domestic violence. Jennifer has been a prosecutor since 2007. She spent almost 11 years in the Anoka County Attorney's Office as part of the Violent Crime Prosecution Team before joining the Ramsey County Attorney's Office in May 2018. Jennifer was the designated attorney embedded in the Human Trafficking Investigators Task Force at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension from November 2020 to July 2022. Jennifer's career has focused on the prosecution of domestic violence, criminal sexual conduct, and human trafficking crimes. Jennifer also has past experience working as a Ramsey County Public Defender and a Ramsey County Corrections Officer. Jen, thank you so much for taking the time with us today, and I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Sasha. I appreciate the introduction. Appreciate you and working with APA throughout the last year as we've navigated our way through the Ramsey County case backlog. And I appreciate everybody's time. Look forward to hearing from any questions at the end as well. I'm going to start off here this afternoon with just giving you some background and some inside information in regards to Ramsey County and our office, how we operate as a prosecuting entity, and then proceed in through how we dealt with our backlog and things that we have going forward. So Ramsey County, as you can see here, was established October 27th of 1849, and it is one of the original counties of the Minnesota Territory. We are located in the heart of the 7-county Twin Cities metropolitan area. We're the home of the state capital, which is St. Paul, Minnesota. We are Minnesota's smallest, but most densely populated county. As you can see there, we span just 152 square miles, but it is the state's most racially diverse county with over 100 languages that are spoken. So we serve a really diverse population and have many communities that are thriving and vibrant here in Ramsey County. I've put up here just a state of Minnesota map, and the little red dot here specifies where Ramsey County is. So as you can see, we're located near the heart of the Twin Cities. We have Hennepin County to just the west of us. And as I mentioned, there's really about 7 very populated metro counties surrounding us as well. Each county within the state of Minnesota has an elected official. That is what we call our county attorney. And our county attorney, we have the distinct pleasure here in Ramsey County of having John Choi as our elected official. Mr. Choi was sworn in as the first Korean American chief prosecutor back in 2011. John is a member of APA, and he truly is a state and national leader when it comes to progressive justice transformation, working with public officials and impacting communities to reimagine justice and the role of the prosecutors that he has underneath him. He is a really forward-thinking, wonderful leader, always looking for the next best thing to help reform justice, to help protect communities and all members of the communities that we serve. So he has special initiatives. I've had the distinct pleasure of being a part of some of those initiatives, particularly, as I mentioned here, combating sex trafficking, sexual assault, and interpersonal violence. Working with victims, best practices, and just really looking for ways to improve our community and support for victims and survivors as well. Just to describe our office demographics here in Ramsey County, so you understand what we're working with and what our office looks like. We are considered a large law office here within the state of Minnesota. We are located in downtown St. Paul, so Ramsey County has various cities that are part of the county, but we are in the downtown St. Paul area. We have roughly 335 employees that make up of our Ramsey County Attorney's Office. That includes our support staff, our paralegals, investigators that deal a lot with our welfare fraud cases. We have non-attorney managers and numerous individuals in our administration division that deal with human resources, hiring. And then amongst those 335 employees, we have about 95 attorneys that work across various divisions, and I'll go through those divisions here shortly. We just recently had the pleasure of moving into a brand new office building in February of 2024. We have a very hybrid work environment for many of our employees. It allows individuals to designate how many days they wish to be in the work environment or in the office. But this brand new space that we have is really lovely. It allows our county attorney's office to now be under one roof, aside from one specific division that still operates at our law enforcement center. But with this new building, we have all of our divisions here and working towards supporting our office mission and feeling as if we are one big team in this new building. As I've outlined here for you as well, we have several different divisions within our county attorney's office. Our Human Services Legal Division supports child support, child protection, and civil commitment areas. So we have designated attorneys that obviously work within each of these divisions. Our Youth Justice and Wellness Division obviously covers all juvenile offenses, juveniles between the ages of 10 and 17 that may be petitioned for criminal offenses. We also have in that division school attendance matters and our runaway intervention program. Within our civil division, We have several attorneys that handle counsel to government, our county government. They're the legal counsel to them. And within our administration division, again, covering all of our finance, procurement, and human resources. We have a pretrial and trial division, and I wanted to just highlight these two divisions in a bit more in depth because they are the true focus of our backlog and where all of our efforts were spent in order to address and come out of our backlog status. So our office here in Ramsey County is somewhat unique in that we have essentially these two divisions, a pretrial justice division and a trial division. So we are not a completely vertical prosecution office. We have this division here in pretrial justice that handles all of the specific areas that are outlined on this slide. We have attorneys that specifically are designated as charging attorneys. They work closely with our law enforcement partners, working with intake, working with obtaining police reports and discovery and making those initial charging decisions. We then have specific attorneys that handle first appearances all the way up through omnibus hearings. They review cases, they make offers on cases for potential resolution. They make the decisions as far as what potentially a defendant could be facing and where the case may head, specifically towards any of our specialty courts. We have a mental health court here in Ramsey County. We have a DWI court and a substance abuse court. We also have a robust diversion program, ways in which low-level, potentially first-time defendants may serve some diversion in order to avoid a felony conviction on their record. So these pretrial justice division attorneys are extremely busy. They have a super important role here within our office as far as managing cases when they first come into the system and helping navigate what may be the best course of action to take in regards to those charges. When it comes to our caseloads that then move beyond the initial phases of our prosecution, they come into what we have as our trial division. We have a really awesome director of our trial division, Hao Win. And then we have two assistant directors, myself being one of them, and Jill Gerber being another assistant director. Our office operates with approximately 35 to 40 trial attorneys at any given time. Over half of those trial division attorneys belong to one of two trial teams. Many other attorneys have specialty assignments as well, and I'll cover those a little bit later in the presentation. But essentially all of our trial attorneys, they take over the prosecution of a case after it passes through our pretrial division unit, in which all litigation will then occur. These trial attorneys that myself, Jill, and Hao supervise deal with all constitutional challenges. Could be anything from search and seizure to Miranda statements. They handle cases at all pretrial hearings, and then they are responsible for any disposition on the case, primarily meaning taking the case either to jury trial or court trial. These attorneys, as you can imagine, are extremely busy, have really large caseloads as we currently speak, and they were even larger over the course of the last year as we attacked our backlog coming out of the pandemic and having to navigate their way through those. So when it comes to our backlog, or the backlog that we had here in Ramsey County, there was a metric that was used by court administration and by all jurisdictions at the direction of the Minnesota Supreme Court. as to how to measure what is our backlog, what are we looking at, what are the numbers that we have to get below. And really what they determined and what they used was looked at for each specific county, the number of open files in March of 2022. So as the pandemic came upon us, what the numbers look like for each specific jurisdiction or each specific county within the state of Minnesota. The backlog was specific to felony and gross misdemeanor files. So for our office, as the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, we handle all felony cases within our jurisdiction. That is our sole responsibility. We also do prosecute a select number of gross misdemeanor cases. And if there are any jurisdictions around that don't have gross misdemeanors, that is a level of crime here in Minnesota between a misdemeanor and a felony level offense that is punishable by up to 1 year in our local jail. We, as prosecutors in the county attorney's office, handle gross misdemeanors that may be criminal sexual conducts in the 5th degree, malicious punishment crimes, and specific child neglect offenses. So what we needed to look at any snapshot was how many open files there were in March of 2020 compared to what we were dealing with over the course of the last year. Our court administration did share with us kind of a trend that they were constantly monitoring to show that number of cases that were open and then what we had open at any given moment. So as the pandemic wore on, we didn't really start to look at the backlog until in Ramsey County until about January of 2022. That was when our courts opened up more significantly during, March of 2020 to January 2022. It was still very challenging to get cases through the system, to have jury trials with precautions and getting people to feel comfortable and safe coming back into the court system. So in January of 2022 was the real push to look at the number and to attack the backlog and get us back down to the number, which was challenging even back in March of 2022. We had very large caseloads at that point. But as you can see from the numbers here, in January of 2022, we were looking at just over 1,400 cases that were considered backlog. And so we were monitored, we were looked at, we were pushed in order to get us to the 0 mark. And with this graph here that was provided, it was essentially the end of 2023. So almost 2 years later, where we were officially done with our backlog status. That's not to say that we're not still monitored. As you can see, the numbers kind of creeped up a bit there. The last snapshot, that being 219 cases above the number where we were in March of 2020. But we're not monitored as far as being pushed to come up with initiatives to attack the backlog at this point, because we dipped under that 0 mark. So that allowed us to at least feel that we were out of the backlog and then decide, where do we go from here? What things did we learn along the way? What can we do better, and how can we continue to be efficient and improve any court processes that we might have? So how did we get there? How did we get from over 1,400 cases to the 0? How did we succeed in that? And really what I can focus in on are many of these initiatives that took place during that time frame, some better than others, but collaboration over or with our justice partners, and continuous examination and review of what we were doing allowed us to manage and work through that backlog. So many of the initiatives that we did focused on specific crimes. There was a lot of discussion about how certain level offenses or certain types of offenses really need that jury trial setting in order to either proceed to trial in a manageable way or reach a resolution. What were the types of cases that really, once it got to that point of being called up for trial, were the ones that we were going to be able to move forward on, either, as I said, with a trial or with a resolution. And so there were a number of cases or a number of types of crimes that we focused in on. We had a domestic violence case event. We had an in custody individual case event. We had a DWI event, and then a property crime event. And when I say event, what I mean specifically is just that we would have a number of cases that would be identified as fitting within that type of crime, that type of charge, and that would be set for a jury trial setting on a specific week, and that may continue for as many weeks as need be until that list of crimes or list of cases were done. And so, as you can imagine, there were pluses and minuses with those initiatives, but we did see significant improvement in our numbers with calling cases up to trial and having specific judges and timeframes available in order to get the case to resolution. In addition to those events, we had a chief judge specialty calendar. We engaged in a leadership review project, which involved management and leadership from various offices, our office, city attorney's office, public defender's office, and court administration, to try to identify cases that may have been pending for a significant period of time that may be ripe for either trial or resolution, and can we come to some specific decisions about those files. And then probably the most intense initiative that was a part of our backlog attack was our court operations meetings. And I'll get into some of these a bit more. As I mentioned, with the events that took place, pluses and minuses of both of them, or of all of them. Specifically, when it came to the trial events, we really recognized from the county attorney's office how resource heavy these events were. It relied on support staff, on advocates, on law enforcement, to be prepared and be ready for such a huge amount of cases and files. And it required them to be available. Scheduling challenges was a huge piece of it. You know, who could be available one week, but maybe not the other. There was a lot of pressure on our justice partners, on victims, on witnesses to be on call for a significant period of time as the cases navigated through this event. We did have several judges that were assigned to each event, so it was a continuous call up of cases. And you know, on some levels, it obviously helped us to get through a great portion of cases. It was also challenging for attorneys, for victims, for witnesses, and questioning whether or not how much justice was being done at times when we're just attempting to push things through so quickly. So that was part of the challenges of the events, but deemed to be obviously very necessary in extreme and challenging circumstances. The chief judge specialty calendar that took place during the course of the pandemic was something that There has been discussion, it's no longer in effect, but there has been discussion about continuing something along this specialty calendar in the future. Really what it was a weekly calendar by our chief judge to handle cases that a request for a continuance has been made with a different judge. There's a review of how old that case is, how many times it has been set for trial, or the circumstances of why it has taken so long to proceed through the system. And ultimately, then the parties had to answer to the chief judge as to why another continuance may be necessary. And whether or not it was granted was obviously up to that chief judge. And if the continuance request was not granted, the expectation was that that case was then proceeding to trial at that time. Maybe not right that day, but this calendar was held every Wednesday afternoon, and it could be as soon as Thursday morning that a jury would be impaneled and available for the attorneys to then start trial. So again, it allowed people, I think, to focus in on the cases that had really been pending for a significant period of time, to really decide what is the viability of the case, how can we proceed, what is the best possible outcome, what kind of resolution can we get from this if there are continued to be challenges to the case. So again, that is something that is no longer occurring here within our district, but there is discussion about having some oversight for cases, again, that seem to be proceeding through the system longer than we would hope. As I also mentioned, our court operations meeting was a huge initiative that took place throughout the pendency of the pandemic, throughout the pendency of the backlog, and continues even currently. We meet less frequently. We were meeting on a weekly basis via Zoom, and this involved many justice partners. The participation was actually quite impressive, but we had city prosecutors, our suburban city prosecutors, our office, we had the public defender's office, we had court administration present, we had our pretrial release attorneys, we had the bench was present at every meeting. And so it was a really collaborative effort to find out, again, how do we get this number down? Obviously, what came from this was our events, was the judicial, the chief judge calendar, and just other discussions and collaboration on how to help us all navigate out of the backlog. From these court meetings, we also really identified the need for a new forward-focused calendar plan coming out of the pandemic. We knew that what was happening during the backlog was a very stressful, very intense time frame for people. And so we needed to come up with something to look forward to, something that others could look at in the future and know that life was maybe going to get a little bit better. We also, from the court operations meeting, established other internal subcommittees here within the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. We brought in advocates, and we brought in support staff, and we brought in trial attorneys to also just all be able to talk through and give perspectives on what is working and what isn't working in the current system, and what we could do going forward. So our look forward, really the three areas we wanted to focus on as we navigated out of the backlog after all of these initiatives took place. What is it going to look like going forward? And the three primary areas that we wanted to focus in on was obviously avoiding anything like this in the future. How can we prevent, as you saw from the graph below or before, 219 cases at the last snapshot? How do we avoid increasing that number? We wanted to adhere to national standards. And one of the most significant or important metrics that is looked at is just the time to disposition, the time to resolution of a case. What is taking so long? Why is something taking so long? And how do we really focus in on what is the best practice, which according to national standards is, for a felony matter, time to disposition should be 1 year. And when we look at the statistics or the numbers of how many cases are beyond that time to disposition, what more can we do in order to make sure that the case is proceeding not too fast, not too slow, but to get justice for those involved and to get resolution for everybody affected by each crime. And then one of the biggest things for our office, for our county attorney's office, was just to find a way to improve attorney well-being. We were cognizant of our attorneys. We knew from our justice partners outside of our office that there was a significant amount of distress among our attorneys and various practitioners. Again, the backlog and the push in order to eliminate that called for resolution. It called for trials. It questioned what people were doing. There was obviously, as we've seen across the country, many people leaving offices, leaving prosecutor's office, attorneys not feeling prepared for the number of cases that they needed to handle. How do we prevent this from occurring again in the future? And just making sure that their well-being is a high priority and that we're taking care of them as well. So what kind of transpired from moving forward and from our initiatives is developing a calendar system, a new calendar system here within Ramsey County's district court. What we have here, when we look at the office split, like I mentioned before, we have our pretrial division and our trials division. When the cases come into our trials division, they are going to ultimately be set for a trial date. And we came up with a calendar plan that gives what is a 4-week trial rotation, meaning our trial attorneys can be on call, can be in trial at a time for 4 weeks. And it's kind of split up in between 2 specific weeks of the 4-week rotation. So cases can be assigned to the first 2 weeks of a rotation or weeks 3 and 4 of a rotation. But it gives the attorneys and everyone involved with the case a specific time in which they can anticipate being in trial. The 4 weeks come and go, and then there's a 4-week window where they are not on call and they're allowed time to meet with victims, witnesses, engage in pretrial negotiation, pretrial preparation. There are pretrial hearings during the 4-week off rotation. They have ample opportunity to deal with any contested motions, contested hearings, but really just this preparation time in order to then move back into the 4-week trial rotation was something that our office and court administration and our defense bar felt was really necessary in order for people to be prepared and to see their case through to the appropriate resolution. The on-call status, as I said, is like a 2-week window within the 4-week trial block. But again, it gives that definitive time frame that allows people to be prepared and more comfortable going into that trial rotation. We have continued to use trial management conferences. It is meant to be a last-ditch opportunity for the attorneys to resolve a case before it is called up for trial. It is still a bit of a work in progress about as far as how the trial management conferences align up with the 2-week trial block. But again, our collaboration and our continued court administration meetings allows us to work through some of the hiccups and some of the growing pains that we're seeing. But this calendar system essentially came into play January 1st of 2024. So we are in the early stages of it, but it does seem to be something that has been well received, at least from the attorneys that I have followed up with and seeing them feeling better about their caseloads and feeling better about their ability to prepare their cases. The calendar system also developed, we identified needing to have judicial teams that were more specific and designated towards our felony rotation. We used to have a greater number of judges that could hear the trial cases. At this point, we have 2 judicial teams. And each team has 4 judges. So they work within a team and they're able to back each other up. That was something significant for our bench that they identified. They enjoyed that ability. They needed that ability to handle their cases. But we also needed it to be a bit more specific so that the oversight of the cases and the files there was just greater oversight with the judicial teams being smaller in nature, so that we weren't seeing that continual request for a new trial date, that we weren't getting more continuance requests because it would be a new judge handling the file on any given appearance. So this new system, as I said, rather new, just a couple of months, couple of trial rotations now for each of the 2 teams. But overall, it sounds as if things are much improved and people are appreciating the rotation that we've developed. A couple of the other procedural changes that have come out of our focus from the backlog. We have here in our office specialty caseloads. We have attorneys that handle only homicide cases. We have attorneys that handle only criminal sexual conduct cases, auto theft cases, and a newer initiative is our non-fatal shooting prosecution. And so we do recognize that specific types of crimes need at times greater attention, more specific personnel on them. And so that is an adjustment that we have made as well, looking at obviously the backlog and looking at how cases have proceeded through our system. Having that designation of specific attorneys to that caseload allows for greater expertise and efficiency. One of or kind of the next 2, our early trial assignment and our hearing locations kind of go hand in hand. But as I've described our office as being not a completely vertical prosecution office, we have shifted gears a bit and allow for cases to be assigned early to certain prosecutors or under certain circumstances. And with that, then there has been a shift from our omnibus hearings continuously being held at our law enforcement center to switching some of those omnibus hearings to our main courthouse. that provides for the trial attorneys to be assigned to the case early, to handle the case from an earlier court proceeding, to understand the posture of the case, to understand the discovery and review the discovery even earlier. So again, it shifts resources, it allocates them better when it comes to more violent crimes and cases of a more serious nature, so that we know that we are doing the best we can in order to be efficient and allow cases to move through the system in a better way. As I said at the very beginning, it was a pleasure to work with the APA, with Sasha and her group, in order to identify ways in which we can continue to improve our workflow, ways to navigate out of the backlog. And so with that, we developed several internal improvements that I think have been well received within our office. As I mentioned, there were several work groups that were identified and implemented as we needed to just challenge ourselves with the backlog. And so it was really working with all of the individuals in our office, and some of those work groups even continue today, where we are continuously meeting twice a month with our support staff and paralegals together in order to make sure that they understand the workloads of one another and develop more of a team attitude and environment when supporting the attorneys through the trial process. We have increased our opportunities for co-counsel on cases. We have a lot of younger, newer attorneys, which has not always been the case in Ramsey County. As being a metro area county, it seemed as if attorneys that worked here, they stayed for a very long time. And when you were fortunate enough to enter the office, it was typically after many years of experience in perhaps a smaller county elsewhere in the state of Minnesota. But with the pandemic, with the change in just work habits and life in general, we see a lot of turnover. We see a lot of opportunities, obviously, for growth for our longstanding attorneys, but we have hired a significant number of less experienced attorneys as well. We recognize the need for them to have greater training in their caseload, and also increased opportunities to work with more experienced attorneys within our office. So increasing those co-counsel opportunities is a focus of ours. That can lead then obviously to greater efficiency. We run less of a risk of falling back into that backlog if we know that our attorneys are trained properly, that they have opportunities to learn from those that have been a part of the office for a significant period of time. With the attorney trainings, that is something that we continue to improve on and work on as well. In-house trainings, which are recorded opportunities for specific areas and geared more towards our less experienced attorneys. We've had several over the last 6 months that involved dealing with witness statements and trial preparation for witnesses. We've had closing argument training. We also have memorialized in our training folder a training notebook that all new attorneys can go to and reference and point to different resources, including the Minnesota Bench Book or links to other training resources. So it's keeping it more in one designated area so that attorneys can go in and focus in on the areas that they need to. And again, hoping that all of these improvements with our internal operations obviously leads into more efficient case management, court management, and case disposition. In addition, some other internal improvements that we have developed is just greater mentoring as well. Making sure that people who are coming into the office are really fit and connected with somebody and know that that resource is absolutely there. As managers, we've identified or heard through our work with APA that our courtroom presence is needed, a greater opportunity for attorneys to learn from our management staff. I can speak for Hao Win, who is our director. He has been present and participating in a number of ongoing cases with newer attorneys, so providing that leadership and providing that mentorship for them. I myself have taken on a role of handling our Rule 20 calendar, which is our competency calendar. We have a number of legislative changes, or actually a new statute that came into effect just on April 1st of this year, so just a few days ago. And it is a huge undertaking as to how our county, along with obviously all of the counties in the state of Minnesota, are going to be able to navigate through that new legislation. And so taking on that role was a way as well to support our trial attorneys to understand what this legislation will do, how it will impact us, and how I can share that knowledge with others in the office. As far as the resource allocation, another thing that we had identified as it came through the pandemic and the calendar process was just listening and learning to our attorneys through our own meetings and meetings that they had with the APA was just how challenging some aspects of their job is. And one of the things that spoke very loudly and very clearly was just the administrative work that they had to do in order to really get their case ready for trial. Organizing and getting witnesses together was a huge source of stress, and particularly as the caseloads grew, it was very challenging for them to have meetings scheduled, to find witnesses, to identify third parties in order to sit in on witness meetings and take notes. And so listening to all of that, there has been a decision to move towards hiring a case aide specific to the trial division. And that person can really coordinate those witness issues. Location, scheduling, meetings, having that person really be a source of support for the trial attorneys as they prepare their cases. So I think that is a really excellent example for our office and kind of summarizes how we did navigate our way through our backlog and came out on this side was just the use of collaboration and supporting others, listening to what really is needed, what are the best practices of others, and how can we grow from that. And so hopefully these internal improvements again will continue. They'll hopefully spawn off into different aspects of our jobs as well, but ways in which we just hope to not have to deal with what we dealt with last year and continue to provide justice for those here in Ramsey County in order to make sure that we are handling ourselves as best we can, providing support to one another, and just really serving our mission here within the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. So I have identified myself and Hao Win, again, our director here in the County Attorney's Office. Those are our email addresses. We are always very excited, willing, happy to discuss with others as far as best ways to practice. What are the best ways that we can and help others within our communities, and have our office be a leader in those ways. So please, if there are questions or thoughts that we can continue to collaborate on, I'm happy to do so. And I know Mr. Wynn would be happy to do so as well. So thank you very much. That is the last of the slides, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Jen. So to our attendees at this time, we would love to open it up to questions if anyone has any. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or the chat box if that is easier for you. And I also know that we do have How on the line as well. So How, it's great to have you on as well. If you had anything to add or share in addition to Jen's fantastic presentation, please let us know. And while we wait for our audience to put in some questions, I did have a couple of thoughts. I think a lot of folks on this webinar might be familiar with the same experience that your office is going through and has gone through, which is a lot more maybe newer, maybe more inexperienced prosecutors having larger and more complex caseloads due to turnover, other factors. And you mentioned some really great tactics your offices use to train them up. For example, the mentorship program. And I was wondering if you don't mind just sharing with the group a little bit more specifically about that program. What does it look like? Say if you have a brand new attorney who starts tomorrow, how would they proceed through that program? How would they be assigned a mentor? What are the kinds of things the mentor shares and trains them on? And any other ideas that other offices watching this presentation might be able to take back to their jurisdictions.
Yeah, thanks. What we do when we have that mentor designated before that person even steps foot into the office. So we do our best with also connecting them even before they come in on their first day, provide email addresses, provide contact information so that, there can be a lot of questions before they even, step foot into the office, and how can maybe make that transition feel more comfortable. And we are just thoughtful about who it is, what is the stress level? What is the caseload looking like of an individual that we might want to be the mentor? Making sure that they're comfortable and that they have the ability, the time and the ability to do it. So we communicate with them obviously in advance as well. I do feel that our office has a really excellent teamwork environment. So the mentors are there as kind of the first go-to, but we also know that there's many people around, just open door all the time to sit down and have conversations with individuals. I think two of the best things that have happened, particularly since the our virtual world, right? Like we're so used to now having meetings of being on Teams or being on Zoom, and you somewhat lose then that ability to just learn from others while you're sitting in the room with them. Whether you're sitting in court and you're sitting in the jury box and you're listening to somebody else's case, or just in the office and hearing people navigate through perhaps an issue or a trial that's coming up. So we lost a little bit of that. So one of the things that was developed through the pandemic and during the backlog was to have designated timeframes where groups of attorneys would get together once a month. It's the second Friday of every month. We have what we call a CSC confab, and it is the ability for somebody to come in and present a recent case involving criminal sexual conduct. It's just one of those types of cases that always seems to cause people more stress. There's more litigation. There's more concerns over victim participation and the well-being of the victim in general. And so it would be a case presentation on perhaps a recent trial or a recent resolution. And then it just opens everybody up to, do you have questions about this? How did you navigate this issue, and talk through it? And so really learning through the process of case presentation. That has then also transitioned into kind of a similar work group that has that meets twice a month, and it's more senior attorneys that will get together with our newer attorneys and allow them to bring cases forward, ask questions. How do I prepare on this? And just maybe what is a good resolution of the case? How can I perhaps, get this piece of evidence in? What is this motion in limine that I need to file? And so they meet on a regular basis as well. They just allow for at least one or two more experienced trial attorneys to always be present, but let the newer people come in with their caseload. And then myself, as one of the managers, is always available to jump in and or approve resolution if need be. But that mentorship has really helped, I think, ease a lot of anxiety and just understanding of how things operate within the office.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so helpful to get that breakdown. Thank you. One other question, and I know you showcased a little bit the usage of data in your county and how that seems to be a tool that's really leveraged by not only your office, but the courts seem to really keep a good track of case flow and other statistics. And I know that your office also has your own case management system, and internally you use it a little bit to evaluate things. So I'd love to hear from you if you're willing to discuss your use of the data, both internally and externally, maybe from the courts, and how you use it and leverage it to get a grasp of your backlog, and maybe also explain a little bit about how you use it generally.
Yeah, our backlog data, a lot of that did come from court administration. And so that was, I think, in a way, a bit of a challenge for us, just because, the data was coming in from the outside agency. We're obviously all working together, but getting it from them and not always knowing exactly what all of it could mean. That was part of a challenge when it came through, just like navigating what's the best way to handle this situation. Our case management system, we have a great ability to run a lot of reports, gather a lot of data as far as length of time of our own cases to disposition, the number of open files in any particular stage of a case, how many omnibus hearings are we having, how many pretrial, how many jury trial cases are set. So, I think it's just a sharing of information that can be really helpful, and knowing that, not one particular set of data is going to be, the answer for everything, but for all of us as a group to work together and provide as much as we possibly can.
Got it. Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah.
And Jen, I just really want to thank you for the time and attention and work that you put into this presentation. I know that I've been walking by your office and you've been focused on this, and you've been just a tremendous partner as we've gone through this project in terms of also getting everything ready, and then the site project, and then now the culmination of this presentation. I think what Jen doesn't say, because she's a really humble person, is part of our mentorship program too, and part of our leadership program is Jen's door is constantly open. And there are people in her office, sometimes I would say 3 to 5 hours a day total. We have so many attorneys in our division, 37 of them, and they go where the answers are, and many roads lead to Jen Verdeja. And so she's just a tremendous asset to this office, as well as to the, I think, new attorneys, as well as the most senior ones here. So I just really want to thank you, Jen, for all of your work that you put into this project.
Oh, you're sure welcome. Thank you.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Hal. And thank you, Jen, for just sharing your time with us today and just providing us such a great insight into the various ways your office has tackled case backlog. And I know that Hal, mentioned this, but you were instrumental in a lot of ways in doing so. So thank you.
Thank you.
So it looks like we're not getting any more questions from our audience today. So we're going to wrap up. For those of you who wish to watch this presentation again or share it with others, this webinar, as well as the corresponding materials, will be made publicly available on APA's website, our YouTube channel, and our membership database within 3 to 5 business days. Thank you all again. That concludes our webinar today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.